But Jesus knew who was in Judea at the time when he lived. In Matthew 10:5, it says, "These 12 Jesus sent forth and commanded them, saying, Go not into the way of the Gentiles, and into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." So when Jesus was here, he said, don't go into the Gentile area, because Jesus was talking. He was in Judea. He was in Judea. He said to his disciples, do not go to the way of the Gentiles. He said, do not go into Samaria, which was northern Israel, but rather find the lost sheep of Israel. So he knew during this time who the Gentiles were, and that the true children of Israel were lost. He was trying to preach salvation to his children, the children of Israel. Later on in the Bible, we all know that he extended this to the Gentiles as well, and all mankind. Here's a picture of how the land of Israel was broken down according to the 12 tribes. And as you can see here at the bottom, you see the tribe of Simeon and Judah is right near Edom. And this is why the Edomites came in and possessed their land first. They didn't possess the land of Asher and Naphtali, because it's way up there near Galilee. Now, during the time of Jesus, the descendants of the Sephardim people, they did live in the land of Israel, and they were known as Samaritans during the time of the Messiah, Jesus. And Jesus again said, don't go into this area. This is further proof. And as I said before in previous slides, that back then that they were talking about the Sephardic Jews, and they're saying that they were black and they were dark, and that everybody back in those days thought that they were a single person. The Jew, the Negro, the Portuguese, they all thought they were all the same people, and they all thought that the Jews were black. So moving forward, the Sephardic Jews, or the Sephardim Jews, spelling is not important, are not of Hebrew Israelite blood. Their true descendants, if they are truly related to the Sephardim people, should be mixed from Assyrian, Edomite, / Esau / Canaanite blood, also mixed with other Arab nations. Now, maybe some of them mixed with the remaining Israelites left in the land during the Assyrian invasion in 700 BC. And maybe perhaps this is why they have slightly darker skin tones and look more like the Arabs from the Middle East, unlike the European Ashkenazi Jews. Or maybe it's just a deception because they are of Spanish, Portuguese stock. However, the mystery is, again, what happened to the black Jews that were living in Spain and Portugal. And were they really descendants of the Hebrew Israelites, or were they just black people that lived in the area that converted to Judaism? You got to take that into consideration. But again, the Sephardic Jews, like many, like the European Ashkenazi Khazar Jews, are not a Semitic people. In Genesis 36:8, it says, "Thus dwelt Esau in Mount Seir, and Esau is in Edom," or Esau is Edom. And in the 1980 Jewish Encyclopedia of 1925 edition, volume 5, page 41, it also says that Edom is in modern Jewry. Now, why would the Jewish Encyclopedia say that Edom is in modern Jewry? Here is the clue. In John 8:33, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees who dwelt in Israel about the truth, setting them free. And the Pharisees responded to Jesus by saying, they answered him, this is Jesus, "We be Abraham's seed," the Pharisees talking, "and we were never in bondage to any man. How sayest thou that ye shall be made free?" So the Pharisees told Jesus, we never been in bondage to no man. So how could you tell us we shall be made free? But in fact, Esau's seed was never in bondage to no man, but they were also of the seed of Abraham through Jacob. So if these people, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, were really blood descendants of the children of Israel, and they knew that their forefathers went through slavery and captivity under the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, then they surely would have said, yeah, our people have been enslaved in captivity for thousands of years. Yes, you're right. They wouldn't have denied that they were never in bondage to any man, or their seed was never in bondage to any man. Because we all know today, if anybody asks African Americans, were your descendants ever enslaved, we all say yes. But this was a clue. The clue that the Pharisees and the Sadducees at that time or just a group of people that were calling themselves Jews because they converted to Judaism. And yes, some of them were of Edomite stock, and if that's the case, then yes, they will be of Abraham's seed, but that does not mean that they were children of Israel. As you can see here, there's pictures of some Sephardic Jews, and as you can see, they have darker skin tones and look more Arabic when you look at compare them to the Arabic people in North Africa. They typically don't look like the Ashkenazi European Jews. They have usually features with brown eyes and black hair, which is also typical among Arabs as well. And they don't have blue eyes and green eyes and blonde hair. Some more pictures. And as you can see, the migration of the Spanish Jews into Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And if you want to take a close look at this, you can always pause it on this frame, and you can look at it longer. So let's move forward. So who is in Israel now? So before we get to the good stuff, we have to explain who are the Jews that are in USA and Israel now. Remember, in the Old Testament, guys, people started out as Hebrew or Hebrew Israelites. Then they were commonly referred as the children of Israel or simply Israelites. The word Jew is a made-up name used to confuse Christians. The letter J did not even exist in the English language until the 1600s. After it was created, it still was not around long enough to be added into the King James inspired Bible of 1611. And they use the word Jew to say that Jew linked to Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was King of the Jews. Therefore, if Jesus Christ was a Jew and we're Jews, then we must be God's chosen people. But you have to distinguish what the meaning of a Jew is in a Hebrew Israelite. So the main group of Jews known today are the Ashkenazi European Jews. Represent 85% of worldwide Jewry. And you have your Sephardic Jews, Spanish Jews, make up about 10 to 15%. And the Ashkenazi Jews, if you ask any Ashkenazi Jew today, you say, where are your descendants from? And they say, what do you mean? You say, are you descendants from Europe? They're going to say yes. And you could just start naming off countries like Russia, Prussia, Germany, Poland, Hungary, and they're going to say, you're right. And they'll kind of be mad. They might be mad because you know exactly where they're from. Because they're not going to, because some of them might say, well, where are your descendants from? Israel. No. Where are your descendants from? And when you ask them that question, they're going to say, they're going to have to fess up and say Europe, because that's where they're from. And the same question, if you ask the Sephardic Jews, they're going to have to tell you the same thing: Spanish, Spain, or Portugal. But the problem is that media and Jews want us to believe, because they control TV and magazine and history books. We're taught this stuff, and so we believe these things. But the truth is that the Jews don't want us to know about their true history, their true heritage, or about the brown people of all races. They don't want us to know this kind of stuff. Never did, never will. Now, it's funny because a lot of TV channels are everybody knows, this is common knowledge, they're controlled by Jews, the script writers, and the script writers write for the TV shows that allow us to see what we see on TV. Just like back in the day, the scribes, they wrote the books. The scribes, like the Pharisees and Sadducees and the scribes that Jesus talked about. Now, Glenn Beck, he aired a special on TV admitting that archaeologists have found rocks in Native American territory, Ohio, predating the arrival of the Europeans, Christopher Columbus, in which the rock writings were of Phoenician Paleo-Hebrew script. Now, if anybody does the research, the Paleo-Hebrew and Phoenician script writings, their alphabet is almost identical. And nobody knew what these writings meant until they finally showed it to some rabbis, and the rabbis understood and said, these are ancient Hebrew Phoenician writings. But how could this be? How did the Native Americans was writing like this? I mean, this is before Christopher Columbus even arrived over to the area. Now you also got to remember that the ancient Indians, Western Indians, were people of color. They weren't white. They were people of color. They had black hair. Most of the features were like many features of man: brown eyes, black hair, brown skin. So were the Native Americans also a tribe of Israel that managed to migrate over to that area? Henry Ford also tried to tell us. So, I mean, have we been fooled? And Henry Ford, you know, he's dead now, but back then he wrote a book, and the book was called The International Jew. And anybody can look this up. It's a long book. In the book, he quoted, "The Jews are not the chosen people, though practically the entire church has succumbed to the propaganda which declares them to be so." And shortly after the World War I, Henry Ford Sr., founder of the Ford Motor Company, assembled a staff of experts in Detroit to conduct research on the European Jews, who at the time been entering America in large numbers since the 1880s. And Ford provided his staff with $7 million for this research. And in 1923, he published the results in a 4-volume book called The International Jew. And it was Henry Ford's conclusion that very few of these people, if any, who called themselves Jews were descendants of the biblical Israelites. Ford further proved that these Jews, while under the cloak meaning disguise, just like in Star Trek, you have the ships went into cloak mode. You couldn't even see them. They were invisible in space. They were under the cloak of being the chosen people of the Bible and were rapidly taking economic and political control of America. In the religious field, Ford claimed that the Jews had secretly gained control of the most Protestant seminaries and Christian book publishing houses and had been able to remove almost all criticism of Jews from Christian literature. And he knew that they controlled the power because he explained that they controlled the motion picture industry, including the porn industry. They controlled the sugar industry, the tobacco industry, 50% or more of the meat packing industry, upward of 60% of the shoemaking industry, men's and women's ready-made clothing, music industry and music videos, which we see today on BET and MTV and VH1, jewelry business, grain business, recently cotton, the Colorado smelting industry, magazine authorship, news distribution, the liquor business, the loan business. There's another famous Jewish guy himself, Ashkenazi Jew, his name's Harold Wallace Rosenthal. He quoted in 1976, "We are amazed at the Christian stupidity. Judaism is not only the teaching of the synagogue, but also the doctrine of every Christian church in America." Wow. Through our propaganda, the church has become our most avid supporter, and this has given us a special place in society. They're believing the lie that we, Jews, are the chosen people and they are the Gentiles. They meaning us, African Americans, Indians, everybody else. This was said by a Jewish person himself. Unfortunately, he was murdered. A lot of people say that shortly after releasing this information in his book, he talked too much and his own people got rid of him. Because whenever you expose lies and you tell the truth, Satan doesn't want us to know the truth. So he has to do what he can to stop it. So this guy, Harold Wallace Rosenthal, he was supposedly murdered for giving up this interview in 1976, during which he boasted about how a group of Jews are manipulating America and the world. In the book, as with the book also, this book called The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, many Jews claim that Rosenthal's interview was yet another hoax created by those mysterious and elusive anti-Semites. But how could you be an anti-Semite if you're not Semite at all? However, as with the Protocols of Zion, what Rosenthal said seems to be true. So hoax or not, it's important to look at. So Rosenthal also himself quoted in his interview that the Jews have established 5 major falsehoods which work to conceal their nature and to protect their status and power to wit. Now these falsehoods are: 1, the Jews are Israelites and thus God's chosen people. 2, Jesus Christ was a Jew, when in reality he was an Israelite from the tribe of Judah. 3, that 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust during World War II. And that 4, all races are equal, or that all are brothers. And 5, that the Jews are just another religious group. And these are interesting 5 points to really pay attention to, because he's an Ashkenazi Jew raised in Judaism as a child and grown man, and he is saying these things about that the Jews are not God's chosen people, and Jesus Christ wasn't a Jew, and that 6 million Jews weren't killed in the Holocaust. So what's going on? Now there's also another man named Benjamin Friedman, and some people may know this guy. He was also influential Jewish guy in politics, and he tried to warn America during a speech in 1961. He actually converted to Christianity after realizing the truth about the heritage of the Jews and the religion and everything else. It just blew him away. He couldn't take it anymore. And he quoted from his speeches. He said, "The Jews, I call them Jews to you because they are known as Jews. I don't call them Jews. I refer to them as so-called Jews because I know what they are. If Jesus was a Jew, then there isn't a Jew in the world today. And if those people are Jews, certainly our Lord and Savior was not one of them, and I can prove that." And he goes on to say, "The Eastern European Jews, who form 92% of the world population of those people who call themselves Jews, were originally Khazars or Khazars. They were a warlike tribe that lived deep in the heart of Asia, and they were so warlike that even the Asiatics drove them out of Asia into Eastern Europe. And to reduce this, so you don't get too confused about the history of Eastern Europe, they were so big, the Khazar kingdom, 800,000 square miles. Only at this time, there was no Russia, there were no other countries, and the Khazar kingdom was the biggest country in all Europe. So big and powerful that when other monarchs wanted to go to war, they borrowed soldiers. The Khazars would lend them 40,000 soldiers. That's how big and powerful they were. They were also phallic worshippers, which is pagan worship of the genitals, which a lot of religions are based off sex and genital worship and man and woman. And he didn't want to go into this. But the king of Khazar became so disgusted with the degeneracy of his kingdom that he decided to adopt a so-called monotheistic faith. At the time, there was Christianity with the Catholic Church. There was Islam that was rising, and there was Judaism. But at the time, it was also really Talmudism, because Judaism was based off the Talmud and the Kabbalah. Before that, it was called the Mishnah. So, like spinning a top and calling out eeny, meeny, miny, mo, he picked out Judaism, and that became the religion of the land. And here, in this another book, another guy named Arthur Koestler, he wrote a book called The 13th Tribe. And this book is, you can get this book. It's not too many people know about this book. I was in Harlem last year, and I was walking on the street in Harlem in the pro-black African movement area where they had a lot of books about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and they had this book sitting there. And not too many people probably will pick up this book because they don't really know what it's about. But in the book, he also exposes Judaism and his people. And he also admitted in the book that the Khazars adopted Judaism as a religion in 740 AD, and that the majority of Eastern European Ashkenazi Jews are of Khazar and Japhetic origin, and they're not Semitic. And he refers to the Jewish Encyclopedia, and he also says that the Jews are more related to Attila the Hun, the Magars and the Igors than Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that they also identified them with Gog and Magog. Because if you look at the old map of Gog and Magog, this is the territory where most of them came from, as most of the European Jews came from Russia. Even quotes from 1,000-year-old Arab historians say that the Khazars and their king are all Jews. Some are of the opinion that Gog and Magog are the Khazars. And it's interesting because in our history books, we never learned about the Khazarian Empire. We may have touched on the Byzantine Empire with Constantine and the Ottoman Islamic Empire, but nobody ever talks about the Khazarian Empire. Why was that left out of our history books? How come nobody knows about it? It's very, very interesting. So he also talks about a letter there's a letter that one of the kings, the Khazar kings, wrote. And he wrote in the letter that his people were descendants of Togarmah and Japheth, who were all ancestors of all Turkish tribes. Now, if you ask any Armenian that knows his history, he will tell you that his people are descendants of Togarmah. Go there, ask any Armenian, say, hey, I said, are you guys descendants of Togarmah? He said, yes. How did you know? That's because he knows his heritage. And Togarmah was a descendant of Japheth. And Ashkenaz was a brother of Togarmah. Very interesting. Very, very, very interesting. And he goes on to talk about the Attila the Hun. He talks about how the Russian communists tried to hide the Khazar Jewish connection. And he also talks about the breaking up of the Khazar Empire, integration of these Jews or Judaism converts into Russia, Poland, and all other European countries. And back then they were known as the Kingdom of Red Jews. And they also joined Genghis Khan and retained their Judaism. And they had interchangeable names. So here in this slide right here, there's a lot of information. It talks about the Crusades and the Khazars. It talks about the origin of the Yiddish language, because the Yiddish language is not Hebrew. Anybody will tell you this. If you speak German and you're from Germany and you hear somebody speaking Yiddish, you will partly understand what they're saying, because it is a mixture of the language that they spoke before. Before they spoke Germanic, Slavic, Turkish language, and eventually when they converted to Judaism, they wanted to learn how to speak Hebrew, and of course they integrated it with their Germanic language. Therefore, somebody that speaks German today can kind of understand what Yiddish is, because it's not true Hebrew. If they were truly descendants of Israel, they would have kept their language. Just like the Arabic language is really old, almost as old as the Aramaic language, and the ancient Ethiopians speak the ancient language of Amharic. So one of the interesting things he goes on to say is that the Israel's right to Palestine is not based on Bible prophecy, even though it does serve a purpose, but it's based on international law. The United Nations decision in 1947 to partition Palestine, which was once a Turkish province controlled by the Muslims, but then was a British mandated territory. It was slashed in Arab and the Jewish state. Here we have a slide showing Ashkenazi Jews. As you can see, with the clothing and the hat and the long sideburns, which is all they say they're doing this because of the Bible. This slide right here is basically going to go over what the letter talked about. In 740 AD, the king, his name was Bulan. And he, like I said, he adopted the religion of the Pharisees and Sadducees, Judaism. They lived around southern Russia, Eastern Europe, all the way down to the Caucasus Mountains. The Caucasus Mountains were between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. And back then, the Caspian Sea was called the Sea of the Khazars. But nobody would notice unless they really do the research and look at old maps. Here's a picture of the Khazarian Empire. As you can see, the Bulgars, and you can see the Black Sea on the left, the Sea of the Khazars, which is now called the Caspian Sea, on the right, and Armenia, Georgia, and Turkey. Here's a slide, pictures of many influential Jews today we see on TV. Many people probably don't even have no clue that they're Jews. Katie Couric, Wolf Blitzer, Mike Emanuel, Barbara Walters, Larry King, Geraldo Rivera, famous Matt Lauer, Dick Morris, and a lot of Ashkenazi Jews, they changed their last names to European last names because they didn't want to be known as Jews in America, because they didn't want to go through persecution, so they changed their last names. Just like, Joanne Rivers. Joanne Rivers is a Jew. She says it all the time on the Fashion E! channel. Albert Einstein was a Jew, and Corey Feldman, he wrote a book exposing Hollywood and Jewish executives in control of the music industry and the movie industry. And here we have Kelsey Grammer, Larry King, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Zac Efron, Zuckerberg, founder of Facebook, Ben Stiller, Gwyneth Paltrow. These are all our TV stars we see on TV. And it's not a coincidence that the music industry, movie industry is controlled by the Jews, and a lot of people you see on TV are also Jews. CNN, Fox 2, News Channel, everybody. So moving forward, around 960 AD, a Jewish rabbi, a Sephardic Jew named Hasdai ibn Sarput from Cordoba, Spain, had heard there was a Jewish nation with a Jewish ruler in Eastern Europe. And Hasdai was a Jewish scholar. He was a foreign secretary, personal physician to Abd ar-Rahman III, 961 AD he lived. And he immediately wanted to make himself known to the Jewish ruler and confirm the existence of a Jewish nation. He believed if he could gain proof that his converted to Judaism kingdom really existed, that Christians can no longer say that the Jews, by way of Judaism conversion, were without a country as punishment for the rejection of Jesus. Because as you know, the Jews that worshiped and followed Judaism, they rejected Jesus. They believed that Jesus blasphemed, saying that he was God, and therefore he violated not one but two or three of the Noahide laws. And because of this, he was crucified. Now, he wasn't crucified by his own people. He was crucified by people that converted to Judaism and were known as Jews during that time. So Hasdai had two Jews, Mar Joseph and Mar Saul, deliver a letter to King Joseph, king of the Khazar Empire. The letter had difficulties getting there at first, but eventually made it via Jews that attached it to a Croat embassy, and later by another messenger named Isaac ben Eliezer of Nemetz, Germany. In the letter known as the Khazar Correspondence, written in Hebrew, he described his location in the western region of Spain in relations to King Joseph's location in other foreign countries. So he wanted King Joseph to know exactly where he was writing from, and he wrote in the letter that he wanted detailed information regarding the Khazar origin, its political and military organizations, and Hasdai admitted in the letter that he was a Sephardic Jew. And Hasdai asked King Joseph what family and tribe he was from. He's probably curious to see, well, was he from the tribe of Judah? Is he from the tribe of Khazar? Or what tribe was he from? So King Joseph replied that he was from a long line of kings of Khazaria, starting with the famous King Bulan in 740 AD. And during the reign of King Bulan, he stated that the Khazarian Empire had to choose between the Muslim religion, Christianity, and Judaism. He had teachers and scholars of each religion teach him about each one. He concluded that his pagan nation would adopt and convert to Judaism. He also stated in the Khazar correspondence that he was a descendant of Japheth. But I know you're thinking, like, wait a minute, I thought the Jews were descendants of Shem, and therefore they were Semites. They are Semites. No, this guy is saying that he's the descendant of Japheth. So therefore he is a Gentile. He's not Semitic. He's not of the Hebrew Israelite stock. He is not of Abraham, because Abraham came through Shem. And so he goes on to say, through the seventh son of Torgomoth, who was the brother of Ashkenaz, same word where the word Ashkenazi Jews come from. And Torgomoth, the father of all Turks and Armenians, had 10 sons: Ujur, Taurus, Avar, Uaz, Bizal, Tarnaz, Khazar, Janor, Bulgar, and Sawir. This is very deep. Very, very deep. Now, another Jew, Ashkenazi Jew, Jack Bernstein, he quoted, the powerful Zionist propaganda machine has led the American people to believe that a Jew is a Jew, one race of people, and that they are God's chosen people. I will deal with the God's chosen people lie later. First, it is important for you to understand that Jews are not one race of people. There are two distinct groups of Jews in the world, and they come from two different areas in the world: the Sephardic Jews from the Middle East and North Africa, and the Ashkenazi Jews from Eastern Europe. The Sephardic is the oldest group, and it is they, if any, who are the Jews, even though this is false, in parentheses, described in the Bible, because they lived in the area described in the Bible. They are blood relatives to the Arabs. The only difference between them is religion. This is Ashkenazi Jew, Jack Bernstein. He wrote a book too, Life in Marxist Racist Israel. He was married to a Sephardic Jew woman, and He is no longer with us because he exposed the truth, and he even wrote in his book that if something happens to me after releasing this book, it's because they don't want the truth to come out. He even stated that if something had happened to him, that they would know it's because that he exposed these lies. And he also quoted that it's one thing for a person that's not Jew to expose this information, but to actually come from a Jew himself, they cannot say that he's being anti-Semite because he is a Semite himself. So, but nevertheless, they still got rid of him, and his book is you can get it on Amazon. So, King Bulan and his descendant King Joseph stated in a letter that before his people came into the land of Volga, which is over in Europe, it was occupied by the Bulgarians. Now, Bulgaria now is near Macedonia or Greece. But back then, it was, they were still in Europe. And a lot of Bulgarians know this, some of them don't know this. So the question people may ask is, well, where are the Ashkenazi Jews from who make up 80%, 90% of the Jews worldwide? Well, as we know, Ashkenaz was the son of Gomer and the brother of Togarmah, as stated in the Bible and in the letter. In Genesis 10:3, chapter 10, verse 3, it says, and the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. In Chronicles 1, verse 6, and the sons of Gomer, again, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. In Jeremiah 51, verse 27, it says, set ye up a standard in the land, blow the trumpet among the nations, prepare the nations against her, call together against her the kingdoms of Ararat, which is Turkey, Mini, which is Armenia, and Ashkenaz, which is Germany, Europe, and appoint a captain against her, because cause the horses to come up as the rough caterpillars. So why would the Ashkenazi Jews use the word Ashkenaz to be their name? Ashkenaz was not of the seed of Abraham. It was of the seed of Japheth. So, like I was saying earlier, the Ashkenazi Jews expose the truth about who the Jews really are, such as Arthur Koestler in his book, The 13th Tribe, and Israeli bestseller author Shlomo Sand, with his book, The Invention of the Jewish People. He's still alive. His book was a bestseller. And then also the interviews of Harold Wallace Rosenthal and Benjamin Freeman and Jack Bernstein's book. They were all Jewish men in different positions, some of them political, who conducted interviews, and they exposed Jewish lies in the world agenda. A lot of them were killed. A lot of them, their death was labeled accidental, just like they do today. When people mysteriously die of a drug overdose, it's labeled as an accident. But Jack Bernstein, who I just talked about, he also paid the price when he was assassinated for telling the truth at the release of his book, again, The Life of an American Jew in Racist Marxist Israel, written in 1985. So let's move on to what the scripture says, who is the children of Israel. Looking at this slide here, you see tracing 430 years of Hebrew history in Egypt. This quote right here, you see ancient Persians, the Elamites, picture right there, black brown face, King Nubia, and we see Egyptian king, all of them with Afro-Negroid features. And the quote says, just think that this race of black men today, our slave and the object of our scorn, is the very race to which we owe our art, sciences, and even the use of speech. And this was quoted by Count Constantine de Volney in the 18th century, a Frenchman, after viewing the Great Sphinx of Giza in Egypt. So how come black people don't know their heritage? Jeremiah 17:4 says, even thyself shalt die, discontinue from thine heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in a land which thou knowest not, for ye have kindled and fire my anger, which shall burn forever. And it also says that in Deuteronomy 32:26, he says, if we scatter the Israelites in the corners and make the remembrance among them to cease among men, and they won't be no more in remembrance. Now, when did they lose their heritage? Well, in the pre-Roman diaspora, the Israelites would slowly lose it under repeated captivity. So over repeated captivity and intermarriage with other races, the Israelites would eventually adopt different religions, and they would intermix with different people, and they would slowly lose their heritage and identity. This started in Egypt, even though they very much knew who they were in Egypt, and then with the Syrians, and this is also witnessed in First Chronicles, Second Kings. The Babylonians started mixing up the scene. The Medes, the Persians, this is in the book of Daniel as well. The Greeks, which is in the book of Joel and the book of Maccabees. Then, lastly, with the Romans and the Edomites, which was foretold in the book of Obadiah, book of Maccabees, and Matthew. Post-diaspora consists of the Israelites that completely lost their heritage per the scriptures and were scattered amongst the nations through migration and slavery. And we all know who has been scattered to the many nations of the world by slavery. And it wasn't Europeans, it wasn't Caucasians. It unfortunately was people of African descent. Now, the Hebrews were enslaved by the black Egyptians during the era of the pharaohs of Egypt in around 4,000 years ago. Joseph was the first son of Jacob and was sold by his brothers to the Egyptians, but like Moses would rule over Egypt during his lifetime. But how could Moses and Joseph, who were both Hebrews, rule over Egypt and his people if they were white? It's because they were black back then, same as the Egyptians, the Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. Here's some pictures of the Egyptian depiction of Hebrew slaves, 1400 BC. Regardless of the date that it says here, we know that it's a long, long time ago. And as you can see here, these people on the picture are doing slave work. They're tilling the ground. They're building bricks. They're carrying water. They're making mud. And as you can see, the people, they have on no shirt. They have on no shirt. And they are brown-skinned people with curly Afro style type hair. So also, people need to understand is that if, nowhere does it show that the Hebrew Israelites were enslaved under the Egyptians and they were white. If they were, they would be in torment because they would constantly, every day, long hours, they would have sunburns, and they're probably going through heat stroke and would eventually have boils and skin cancer. And, this was not what the original man originally had. The original man had melanin, so that his skin was able to adapt to UV radiation of the sun. It was like a reflecting his own personal inbred sunscreen. And as you can see, the people that were doing the slave work for the Egyptians had their shirt off, and they were doing this in the hot sun, rays of the sun, 4,000 years ago. Okay, let's move forward. This picture right here of some more Egyptians. A lot of times the Egyptians, they wore the headdress with the little snake. And so a lot of people in this picture right here with the grapes, they think that this is a picture of an actual Egyptian boy, and behind him is a Hebrew boy, and that's holding the bucket, collecting the grapes that the Egyptian boy is picking. And if that's the case, then they both are the same color. And as you can see, the Hebrew boy in the back has nappy woolly hair. He's brown skinned as well, just like the Egyptians. Right here, this picture of Queen Tai of Egypt. She ruled alongside Pharaoh Amenhotep III and was the mother of Akhenaten. And she ruled around 1390, 1353 BC. And as you can see here by her picture, this is obviously a picture of a black woman. Her face is not white. They didn't use marble to depict a white face like the Romans did. This face is obviously black, and her hair is like an afro, just similar to an African-American woman or African today. Here we see another picture of ancient Egyptians on the walls, the pictures, and here we have an African, probably from somewhere near Egypt, Ethiopia, Somalia, with the same type of hairstyles the ancient Egyptians had, which was Negroid in appearance. So, if anybody really studies the Bible, you should understand that the children of Israel were also a dark race, just were the sons of Ham. In the beginning, they kept their race pure, but eventually they would intermarry with the sons of Ham, the Egyptians, the Libyans, the Ethiopians, and Canaanites. This is common knowledge if anyone really pays attention to the scriptures. The Bible has numerous scriptures that point out that the children of Israel were black and not black as if they spread ashes on their bodies from mourning. This was a trick that many used to discredit the black Hebrews. In Lamentations 5:10, it says, our skin was black like an oven because of the terrible famine. Now, anybody knows that when black people go through starvation and dehydration and illness in Africa, that they appear darker. Everybody knows that when you get sick with cancer, black people get darker. When black people are on hemodialysis, they get darker. When black people die, when you go visit the casket, the person was brown skin or dark skin. When you see them in the casket, he's going to be really black. And this is not a coincidence. Black people don't turn pale. And you know, this is explaining to you that their skin was black like an oven because of the trouble famine. And back then in these times, they were in the area of the Middle East and Africa, so it was hot. There was no food, and there was no water. The sun was beating on their skin, and so because of this, their skin was black. Lamentations 4:8, their visage, which means face, if you look it up, is blacker than coal. They are not known in the streets. Their skin cleaveth to their bones. It is withered. It has become like stick. Now, we all know that, again, if your skin, if you're in constant heat, you dehydrate it, your skin withers up. Your skin gets darker because of the sun. Your face gets black because your face is exposed to the sun. It's right there. And so people walking around, their face is one of the first things is going to get hit by the sun, and it's going to turn color. It's turn black. And when you become real malnourished, your body becomes like sticks and bones. The Lord also said that the Hebrews were different than the sons of Ham. Exodus 11:12, but against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue against man or beast, that ye may know that the Lord doth put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. In Jeremiah 14:2, it says, Judah mourneth, and the gates, which is the wise men, therefore languish. They are black unto the ground. Now we know that the ground is not white. We know that the ground is different shades of brown. This shows the true color of the Hebrew Israelites. Also says the Lord, Jesus, Hebrews 7:4, for it is evident that our Lord sprang out of Judah, the tribe of Judah. Now, in 1931, Austrian Jewish biblical scholar and art historian Robert Eisler, they published a classic in Josephus Flavius, or Flavius Josephus scholarship. It was called The Messiah, Jesus, and John the Baptist, according to Flavius Josephus' recently discovered capture of Jerusalem, and other Jewish and Christian sources. Now, this man, Robert Eisler, endeavored to restore the original reading of a first century text that discusses John the Baptist, Jesus, and the early Christians. This first century source is called the Holosis, or meaning capture of Jerusalem, of Judean Roman writer Flavius Josephus during the time of 3700 AD. Originally written in Aramaic, a Greek rewriting was published around 72 AD. This is an important text for the discussion of Christian origins, particularly given the section therein treating the human form of Jesus and his wonderful works. Now, Josephus, the first century Judean historian, was believed to have had access to the official Roman records on which he based his history of the early Jesus movement. He is thus a singular contemporary witness. His text passed through Christian scribal hands, during which process the texts were by no doubt altered. Some offensive passages were omitted and some Christian embellishments interpolated. However, according to Eisler, a Slavonic Old Russian translation was made from the original Greek text, preserved in scattered form in the original Flavius Josephus testimony. Here's a picture of Flavius Josephus. First name was Titus Flavius Josephus. As you could tell by his first name, he was a Roman, just like Roman Emperor Titus that laid siege to Jerusalem during the time shortly after Jesus Christ's death. As you can see here, even though Jewish people call him a Jewish historian, he was a Roman by blood. He practiced Judaism, therefore he was known as a Jewish writer. And he also lived and was born in Judea. So these are things that people really have to pay attention to. Just because you're born in Judea, just because you live in Judea, just because you practice Judaism, does not mean that you are of Hebrew Israelite ethnic stock. He was simply a Jew that practiced the religion of Judaism. Now, this is what he wrote when it was translated in Greek in preserved form. And this is really deep because not a lot of people have read this. He wrote down here, quote, "At that time also there appeared a certain man of magic power, if it be meet to call him a man, whose name is Christ, whom certain Greeks call a son of a god, but his disciples call the true prophet, who is supposed to have raised the dead and to have cured all diseases. Both his nature and his form were human, for he was a man of simple appearance, mature age, black skin, which in parentheses they have malagrous, which means black skin, short growth, 3 cubits tall, hunchback, prognathous face, with a long face, a long nose, eyebrows meeting above the nose, that the spectators could take fright, with scant curly hair, but having a line in the middle of his head after the fashion of the Nazarenes, with an undeveloped beard. Now, Flavius Josephus is saying here that the man that they called Christ, Jesus, the Greeks said that he was a prophet, supposed to read dead people, cure all diseases. He was a man of simple appearance. He was mature age. He was black skinned. He was short. He was 3 cubits tall, hunchback. He had a prognathous face, which a lot of people will say that Africans have prognathous face with the cheeks and the noses and the lips. And he had a long nose. He had eyebrows meeting above the nose, and he had curly hair. This is a description of a black person. And it's very interesting as we don't have this, not too many people know about this. And this is from over 2,000 years ago. Here we see more pictures of the Egyptians with black skin, brown skin, and Hebrews with short hairstyles, similar to African American if you got a haircut. It's not long and straight like a European hairstyle. Here you see here the Egyptians that were ruling over many nations of people, including Nubians and Ethiopians and Libyans and Israelites. Notice that they're ruling over people that are brown skinned just like themselves. It's from the tomb of Horemheb. Here it says the pharaohs are overseeing counting Nubian prisoners. And to note, in the Bible also talks about Joseph. Joseph, we know, was ruled with the pharaoh, and he was the first son of Jacob. And the pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphanath-Paneah, and he gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On. And the priest of On was an ancient big city in Egypt. And Joseph's wife was an Egyptian woman. And Joseph and Asenath would have 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which was one of the, make up 2 of the 12 tribes of Israel. And it says this in Genesis 41:15, that he bore children, Manasseh and Ephraim. Here we have, keeping along with Egypt, we see Egyptian Pharaoh Mentuhotep. Hotep means peace. The second, as you can see here, his face is black. He's a black man. And it says here, when Joseph went to bury his father Jacob, he went with all the servants of the pharaohs, the elders of the house, and all the elders of the land of Egypt. And all the house of Joseph and his brethren and his father's house, only the little ones and the flocks and their herds, and they left in the land of Goshen. Now, making a side note, the word El in Egyptian religion stands for God. The same also stands for God in Hebrew. That's where we get the word El Shaddai and Elohim. And of course, if you're a follower of the religion, you are an elder, E-L, elder, just like Elohim and El. That's interesting. So Joseph left Egypt to bury his father Jacob in the land of Canaan. Those accompanying him were the children of Israel and Egyptians. But wait, in the book of Genesis 50, verse 9-11, it reads here, and there went up with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very great company. So it was a lot of people, Joseph, the children of Israel, the Egyptians, and they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond Jordan, and there they mourned with a great and very sore lamentation. And he made a mourning for his father Jacob 7 days. And when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw this from a distance, the mourning in the floor of Atad, they said, this is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians. Wherefore the name of the place was called Abel Mizraim, which is beyond Jordan. Now Mizraim is another name from Egypt. And the Canaanites, the scripture proves that the black Canaanites could not distinguish the Hebrews from the Egyptians in the great company that they were with that came to the land. They saw the great company of people, and they said, this is a great mourning, a grievous mourning to the Egyptians. Now, if the Hebrews and Joseph and them were white, then they would say this is a grievous mourning for the Egyptians and the Hebrews. But they could not tell who was in that company. They said, well, these are all Egyptians. We're just going to say it's a grievous mourning to the Egyptians. So that's a clue that nobody really pays attention to. Here we see Hebrews making mud bricks. This is found in the tomb of Rechamir, the vizier on Thebes, Luxor tomb. Here you can see again, Hebrews, Israelites were black. The Egyptian slaves, all the people in those days were black. And here's some more pictures. Everybody has brown skin. Exodus 12:37-38. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses into Succoth, about 600,000 on foot. There were men besides children, and a mixed, note the word mixed, multitude went up also with them, and flocks and herds and very much cattle. So in those days, how could anyone tell the difference between a Hebrew and an Egyptian if they were both black, if they both had black skin, brown skin? The same way we often mistake light-skinned African Americans for being the offspring of a white and black parent. A lot of times you see a light-skinned African American, you will sometimes automatically assume that somebody, one of your parents is white, but that's not always the case. In fact, sometimes you may have both parents that are darker than the light-skinned child, but you got to look at the genes and genetics. So an important thing to note. This is very deep. This is very, very deep. If you really connect the dots, important thing to note is that the tribe of Simeon, Judah, and Levi, as well as all the other tribes of Israel, intermarried with the black Egyptians, black Canaanites, and neighboring African nations they lived amongst for thousands of years. Now, the tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh were black, of course, because Joseph was indistinguishable from an Egyptian, as the Bible tells us when his brothers kept coming back from Canaan to Egypt, and they didn't recognize him, and he was standing there with the rest of the Egyptians, and he probably had on the Egyptian gear, but nevertheless, they still could not remember their brother until Joseph finally made himself known to them. Joseph, if he was a white Hebrew amongst a whole bunch of black Egyptians, and the pharaohs, they would say, oh, he looks kind of like our brother. And they would have known him, even if he had on Egyptian gear and headdresses and everything, that he was not somebody that was Egyptian. He was of another race, another nation. But Joseph looked just like the people of that land. He was indistinguishable from an Egyptian, and his wife was an Egyptian. His kids, Ephraim and Manasseh, were half black, half Hebrew. So if Joseph and Benjamin were both brothers, Benjamin, one of the tribes, then they had the same mother named Rachel. This would mean that the tribe of Benjamin was also black because they shared the same mother, Rachel, and because Joseph was the same color as the black Egyptians during those days. Now, also, if the tribe of Dan was black, because we know that Samson has 7 locks of hair. No race on this planet can naturally grow 7 locks of hair unless you have the kind of 9 ether type hair that curls and can start to lock on its own. Now, black people can not do anything to their hair, let it grow, go to bed, wake up, and over time it will get matted and it will develop into a lock. Caucasians have to back comb, tease, they have to do all types of tricks and maneuvers to get their hair to lock. And it's not going to be 7 locks of hair. Now, this is a clue that Samson was also black. And we also have evidence of an ancient man named Eldad, the Ethiopian Danite, who was black, also from the tribe of Dan, whom the Israelites in Israel attest that the Beta Israel Falasha Ethiopian Jews are from the tribe of Dan. They get that from Eldad, the story of Eldad, the Ethiopian Danite. That's the only reason why they say that the Ethiopian Jews are from the tribe of Dan is because of this man named Eldad the Danite. So if the tribe of Dan was black, this will also mean that the tribe of Naphtali was black because they shared the same mother, Bilhah. Lastly, if Moses was the same skin color as the Egyptians in his days, and he had children with an Ethiopian woman named Zipporah, then this would likely mean that all of Moses' cousins, the descendants of the tribe of Reuben, Simeon, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun, will be black as well by way of their same great-great-grandmother Leah. So no matter what part of the world the 12 tribes of Israel has scattered to, the black DNA in their genes would still produce offspring hundreds of years later, showing some of the physical characteristics of a black person: brown skin, woolly, kinky hair, full lips, broad nose, and brown eyes. They're black roots. So here we see pictures of some famous black entertainers. Lloyd is a R&B singer, as you can see here. He's brown skin. He's biracial. He's a white parent. He received Bob Marley. A lot of people don't know it, but Bob Marley's dad was white. It's German, but you can still see that his hair is still Negro in texture, and he has locks of hair. It's not straight like a Caucasian. And you see Faith Evans, an R&B singer. She's biracial. Boris Kojo, also biracial, brown skin. Lenny Kravitz, you can look at him and say, well, you know, one of his parents is white, but he still has Negro, kinky African hair. He still has brown skin. Terrence Howard, also brown skin. Sometimes been browner than light-skinned African Americans with two black parents. And you have Halle Berry. These are all famous entertainers. So back then, Herodotus, 480 BC, he quoted this about the Egyptians. He said, "For the fact is, as soon as I came to realize myself, and then heard from others later that the Colchians are obviously Egyptian. When the notion occurred to me, I asked both the Colchians and the Egyptians about it, and found that the Colchians had better recall of the Egyptians than the Egyptians did of them. Some Egyptians said that they thought that the Colchians originated with Sesostris' army, but I myself guessed their Egyptian origin, not only because the Colchians were dark-skinned and curly-haired, which does not account for much by itself because these features are common in others too, but more importantly because the Colchians, Egyptians, and Ethiopians are the only few peoples in the world who practice circumcision and who have always done so." Herodotus also quotes in 480 BC, "As for me, I judge the Colchians to be a colony of the Egyptians because, like them, they are black with woolly hair." Another Greek historian, Xenophanes, historian and philosopher who lived during 500-400 BC, quoted this about the Egyptians: "The men of Egypt are mostly brown and black with a skinny, desiccated look." Here we have a picture of the inner tomb of one of the Egyptian pharaohs. As you see on the walls, the Egyptians were black. They were not white as the Bible, well, as the movies and the TV shows they show us on TV. So Herodotus cited the story told by the Egyptian priest about Pharaoh Sesostris, who once led an army northward through Syria and Turkey all the way to Colchis, westward across southern Russia, and then south again through Romania until he reached Bulgaria and the eastern part of Greece. Sesostris then returned home the same way he came, leaving colonists behind at the Colchian River faces. Herodotus cautioned the reader that much of this story came secondhand from Egyptian priests, but also noted that the Colchians were commonly known to be Egyptian colonists. Now, according to Diodorus Siculus, who calls him Sesostris, and Strabo, he conquered the whole world, even Scythia and Ethiopia, divided Egypt into administrative districts, and was a great lawgiver. And he says that he introduced a caste system to the Egypt and the worship of the pagan Greek Egyptian god Serapis Christus, which was just one of the pagan gods they had. But Strabo, Diodorus, Herodotus all traveled through Egypt and made comments on the Egyptians and their black appearance. Here's a sculpture of Pharaoh Sesostris, who was one of the pharaohs of Egypt. Here's the area of Colchis, which is in modern-day Georgia today, right above Armenia. Now, it's interesting that the Egyptians would be all the way out there, and you see black people out in this area near the Black Sea. Here's some more pictures of the Middle East, Asia Minor. And so we know the Egyptians were black. Solomon made affinity with the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and took the Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David. and he made a building. He built a house for her, and he would have kids with her. And so that's, Solomon's from the tribe of Judah. So as we know, if he's from the tribe of Judah and he has children with Egyptian women, the children would be black. Now, this is also interesting. A lot of Arabs don't know about this. They definitely know. The older ones know who this guy is. This guy, his name is Egyptian. His name is Gamal Nasser. He was the Egyptian president in 1952, and before Mubarak, and he quoted this on TV, radio. "You will never be able to live here in peace because you left here black and came back white." Now, he said this after a couple of years after the state of Israel was created in 1948. But the question is, why would this Arab Egyptian president say that the Israelites left black and they came back white? Well, why would he say that? I mean, he has nothing to gain. He has nothing to expose. He's not trying to identify himself as being a Hebrew Israelite. He's not black himself, but yet he is here admitting and quoting that the Hebrew Israelites left black and came back white. But we all know that, a black person can't turn white, just like we know that a white person can't turn black. Two white people cannot produce an African baby, nor, if they lived in Africa for 1,000 years, nor could their generations of children turn black in the sun. It's a misconception to believe that the sun can make you turn black, because it's not true. It's all genetics. The melanin has to start from somewhere. The melanin is what makes us have brown skin. Caucasians have little to no melanin. This is why when the sun hits their skin, they get red. They get a sunburn, and too much exposure leads to skin cancer. So, Moses, we all know the story of Moses when he was the ruler over the Egyptians and the Hebrews. In Exodus 2:15, it says, "Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priests of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to the water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered the flock. And when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, How is it that ye are come so soon today? And they said, An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flock." So right here, the girls of Midian didn't even know that Moses was a Hebrew. They said an Egyptian delivered us, and Moses probably was wearing the same. If not, he might have been wearing just regular clothes, but they did not know that he was a Hebrew Israelite. They described him as an Egyptian. Back then, the Egyptians were black. This is a known fact. They thought that Moses was a black man. They described him as a black man, and it is what it is. Moving forward. So in the Bible, it says in Exodus 1:14, "And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, in mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field." And this picture shows the Egyptians and the Hebrew Israelite slaves, using the mud to build the bricks, to build the pyramids. This was slave labor, and as you can see, the people in this picture are not Caucasian and they're not white. Now, like I said before, Paul was an apostle to the Gentiles. In the Bible and in Scripture, it says, "And as Paul was to be led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, May I speak unto thee? And the chief captain, said, Can thou speak Greek? And so the captain was a Greek man. He said to Paul, he said, Can you speak Greek? And then he said, Art not thou that Egyptian which before these days made us an uproar and led us out into the wilderness 4,000 men that were murderers? So he looked at Paul and said, Well, can you speak Greek? And aren't you an Egyptian? So when the Greek man saw Paul in Greece, he didn't see him as a Greek man. He saw him as an Egyptian. Back then, of course, as you can see in the picture here, the Egyptians were black. Paul was from the tribe of Benjamin, which was the brother of Joseph. Therefore, the Hebrew Israelites of the tribe of Benjamin were black. Here we see more pictures of the ancient Egyptians, writings on the wall, pictures. And as you can see, there's no Caucasians here. There's no people with white skin here. People need to wake up. Here you see some more pictures. Pictures of Pharaoh ruling over different nations of Ham. He has the hair of all three different races, and you can see there's a dark skin one, there's a brown skin one. And Pharaoh has them all by the hair. Now let's take a look into the rest of Africa, Libya and North Africa, because a lot of people when they talk about Libya's in Africa, and Egypt is in Africa now. And Egypt, a lot of Africans will say, well, the Egyptians there are not really African because they're Arab, and the Libyans are not really African because they're Arab. And when you see Libya, you watch some TV, Gaddafi, you see white skinned Libyans. But back then, the ancient Libyans were black. The Libyans were originally known as Put, and this is what Joseph Flavius wrote concerning them. He said Put was also the founder of Libya, also called the inhabitants were called Putites. From himself, there was also a river in the country of the Moors, which Libya is known for, the Moors, which bears that name once it was. And so, and this was written in his book, The Antiquities, Book 1, Chapter 6-2. The ancient Libyans sometimes are also known as Berbers, Moors, or the Tuareg people. In the book Destruction of the Black Civilization, Chancellor Williams declared that Libya was once so nearly all black that it was to be called a Libyan meant to be a black person. More pictures of people in North Africa. As you can see, they have the Moorish look with the cloth wrapped around their head, just like the Arabs do. And Herodotus even wrote about Libya in his book, The Histories. He said, one thing I can add about this country, so far as one knows, it is inhabited by 4 races, and out of the 4, only 2 are indigenous. 2 are indigenous, meaning a native of the land, and 2 are not. So the indigenous people are the Libyans, the black Libyans, and the black Ethiopians. And the former occupying the northerly and latter, the more southerly parts, are the immigrants, and they are the Phoenicians and the Greeks. And later in Book 7, Herodotus says that the Eastern Ethiopians, meaning the Dravidian, the Indian people that we see today in India, they were called Eastern Ethiopians because they were on the east side of the Red Sea. For there were 2 sorts of Ethiopians in the army who served with the Indians. They were just like the southern Ethiopians, except for their language and hair. Their hair is straight, while that of the Ethiopians in Libya is the crispiest and curliest in the world. So, explaining this right here, Herodotus is saying that the Eastern Ethiopians in the southern part, they were dark-skinned. They had different language, which the Indians do, based off the ancient Sanskrit language, and the hair texture was different. Their hair texture was straight. Their skin color was the only thing that was the same for both of them. They were both brown-skinned black people, and that the Libyans were people that had the crispiest and curliest kinky hair in the world. More proof that the ancient Libyans were not Arab, because Arabs have straight hair and they were black. Now the Moors also lived in this time. The Moors were a group of North African population which conquered and ruled Spain and parts of Portugal for more than 700 years, beginning in 711 AD and ending in 1492 AD. And it appears from research that even before this period, going back into antiquity, the North African tribe has been synonymous with Iberia. It's a picture of Moors. The term Moor has been put to diverse use, but its roots are still traceable. The word Moor originates from the Roman word Morus, M-A-R-U-E-S, which is a derivative of the Greek adjective moros, meaning black or dark. In the year of 46 BC, the Roman army entered northwest Africa, where they encountered black Africans, whom they called Moors. During the European Renaissance explorers, writers, and scholars began to apply the term Moor to Africans in general. Moro is referring to all things dark, as in Moor or Moreno. Moreno can mean dark-skinned people in Spain, Portugal, as well as Brazil or Mexico. Now, the Tuareg people are also the ancient original people of North Africa with obvious physical and cultural affinities to the ancient black Negritos of the Saharan Desert. Now, they descended from the Garamantes, who once controlled the caravan trade routes across the Sahara Desert. The Tuareg are nominal Muslims. They speak a Berber language called Tamaské, and read and write the Tifin script, excuse my pronunciation, related to the ancient Libyan ones in 3 BC to 3 AD. But no one knows the exact number of the Tuaregs, as they are divided up in different countries. It is approximated at more than 1.5 million people. The Tuareg people's groups are divided between Niger, Nigeria, Mali, Algeria, and Libya. The largest group lives in Niger and Nigeria. Now, the Tuareg is supposed to have the original native language of the Libyans. It's only known to a few, mostly the black Tuaregs, who are natives of the Libyan land. Most now of the North African peoples speak Arabic, mainly because of the Islamic Arabic invasion of North Africa that happened between 300 and 600 AD. Before that, Libya was black, and most black Libyans now live in the city of Tawarga. According to some Libyans, the name Tawarga was given to the town's black population because they had dark-skinned features like the original Tuareg people of Libya. Now, here's a picture of the Libyan pharaoh Solsenk the first. He reigned in 943 BC to 922 BC, and he was a ruler of the Egyptian 22nd and 23rd dynasty. And as you can see here, this is in the Cleveland Museum. This is obviously an African black man, not a European man, not an Arabic man as well. There was another Libyan pharaoh named Orsakan II of Egypt. He ruled from Egypt from 874 until 850 BC, a time of relative peace and prosperity. And his tomb area was very small, but allowed enough space to see that the ancient Libyan pharaohs that ruled during this time were black. Here we see another picture of Orsakan II of Egypt. He obviously is black with a sort of a hair style of like dreadlocks. More pictures of the Moors and the people of North Africa that are black, which we don't typically see when we watch news. This also shows some ancient African presence in North Africa, the Carthaginians and the Etruscan world. As you can see, pictures of Hannibal and pictures of early Italy and Tunisia and Carthage. As you can see, all these sculptures and pictures and coins depict African people. Even the mummy that they dug up in Libya and Egypt, they even still look black to this day. These are some ancient pictures of some black people living in Libya. And another picture of some Libyan prisoners of Ramses III, Egyptian pharaoh, in the Medinet Habu temple. Pictures on the walls do not lie. Here we see another Libyan pharaoh. Name is Input. Going back to Put, one of the sons of Ham. The second, 23rd dynasty. As you can look closely here on the close-up version of the picture, you can see that his hair has little circles signifying kinky, tight curled hair, or nowadays you would call them naps. And as you can see here in Libya, they don't take too well to Libyans that are dark skinned, that are more of African stock, ethnic stock. During Gaddafi's fall, a lot of the black Libyans were taken and shipped out. Up to about 35,000 black Libyans were rounded from the city of Tawarga by rebel forces and were either exterminated, imprisoned, or exiled to refuge camps and then beyond Libyan's borders. Here you can see here they have guns to the head of all the black Libyans. They don't want them there, even though they're the natives and the people that were there first. More pictures of, as you can see, black African Libyans, probably more indigenous than the Arabs. They're laying on the ground, tied up, hands behind the back, guns to the head. So back then, did the Garden of Eden, did it start in Africa? Did it start in Mesopotamia? The Arabs would say that the Garden of Eden was started in Mesopotamia, near the Tigris and Euphrates, Fertile Crescent area. But no, I said, but you got to look at the Bible. The Bible says in Genesis 2:10, verse to 11, and a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted and became into four heads. The name of the first river was Pison, that is it which compasseth the whole land of Havilah. Now Havilah was the son of Cush, where there was gold, and the gold of that land is good, and there was bdellium and onyx stone. And we all know, if you do your research, that onyx, gold, and bdellium is abundant in Africa. In Genesis 2:13, and the name of the second river is Gihon. The same is that compasseth the whole land of Ethiopia. Now, what river encompassed the whole land of Ethiopia? Which back in those days, Ethiopia was pretty much made up the majority of Africa, and that's only the River Nile, the Nile River. And as you can see again in the map of Ethiopia and in Africa. And people of the land of Africa are people with melanin. This gives us our brown skin color, even to the darkest of skin tones. So Hebrew, or the so-called Negro, there's a lot of books written about this. Again, the scripture where it talks about how all these curses shall come upon thee and shall pursue thee and overtake thee, because we didn't keep his commandments, and these curses shall be upon thee for a sign, and upon thy seed forever. And these curses will be upon the children of Israel and the seed forever, until the time when the Son of Man returns, that when Esau's seed, Edom, is destroyed, and the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Romans 11:25 also depicts this. For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part has happened to Israel, until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. In other words, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. And Jeremiah 24:9 says, and I will deliver them to be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth, for their hurt to be a reproach and a proverb, which is another word, and a taunt and a curse in all places where I shall drive them. Blacks are scattered to all kingdoms, while the Gentiles are in possession of Israel right now. That is until the time is going to be fulfilled. African slave trade shows, of course, the slave trade from the west coast of Africa all to the Americas and the islands, Europe, and the Middle East. Again, these are some more scriptures about Israelites losing their heritage and being shipped off to a land that they won't know the nation, the language of the land, and have daughters and sons go into captivity. So we got to think about, who does the scripture seem to be talking about? Remember, the curses that God foretold was going to be upon the Israelites, only the Israelites, forever. So let's take a look at these curses and how they kind of parallel what blacks are going through today. So starting with Deuteronomy 28:16, the curses of Israel: cursed shall thou be in the city, and cursed shall thou be in the field. Here we have a picture of black people, blacks at food kitchens and places where you can get food, soup kitchens, and of course black people are more in poverty in America than any other race. And as you can see in the city, there's so much destruction and despair, with abandoned homes, the doors are just busted down, wide open, house half burnt down, broken glass, trash all over the place. Even in the country, it's still the same way. In most states, when there are a majority of blacks living in a crowded city or country, in the poorest conditions, these areas are nicknamed the ghetto, the projects, the hood, slums, and many more. Nobody wants to invest money in these areas. Only a select few business owners are willing to set up stores in these areas, such as the Arabs, the Koreans, and Jews, because they know how to make money off of us. Banks don't give us loans for businesses in our communities, but gladly give other races loans. This is all part of the agenda. These places are run down with lack of certain basic services that suburbia provides its residents. Now, these areas to outsiders may look similar to war-torn countries overseas like Beirut, Lebanon, but it's the home of blacks and African Americans. And this is not just in America. This is over in Haiti. This is in South America, in Brazil. If you go anywhere where the blacks are located at, most likely they will be living in more poverty than any other race. Now, the lack of jobs, education, decent housing, and a political voice leads to frustration, which then leads to increased crime. Unfair treatment practices in the judicial system leads one to believe that the world has an agenda to destroy blacks, like the Negro Project of 1939. Now, here we have a homeless man, and there's a lot of homelessness going on in America. And of course, if you're in poverty, then you're one step to being homeless. And we know that blacks are in poverty, as you can see here, places where a lot of homeless reside, in Detroit, and Miami, and Philadelphia, everywhere you go. You're going to see this. You can see a majority of black people. Even on the outskirts, in a nice city, downtown, there's still areas a couple miles away where it's nothing but destruction. Not the same. Back then, in the cotton fields, harsh living conditions. In the countryside, in the South, even in Haiti, you can see the destruction and despair that's going on in the community. Abandoned buildings and huts and animals running around and trash in the water and trash on the floor. Just poor living conditions. Some can look at this and say, well, in the background we see a nice city, a modernized city, and in here we see nothing but shacks. Shacks similar to what people, some places in Africa live in, and even in Haiti, and even in the Americas, South America. As you can see here, these are not great living conditions to live in that black people are subject to. Deuteronomy 28:17-18. Cursed shall be thy basket and thy store. Cursed shall be the fruit of thy body and the fruit of thy land, the increase of thine and the flocks of thy sheep. So blacks haven't basically progressed in America as people despite being here over 500 years. Immigrant Jews and Greeks and Italians, Koreans, Chinese, Arabs, Europeans, Indians, and Latinos all have surpassed us despite only being here maybe a little over 100 years. They make up the majority of businesses in Detroit and a lot of other cities. We make them rich while we stay poor. This helps their children be successful and keeps the cycle going. They become our bosses. They become engineers, doctors, lawyers, tax preparers, CEOs. They become franchise owners, owners of schools, and the cycle continues. Our black dollars don't get recycled into black businesses because there are none. Therefore, we remain poor while they thrive. Here we can see a lot of inner cities. You see liquor stores and beer market, wine markets, accepting bridge cards, Metro PCS stores, Coney Islands, get food. You see gas stations. This gas station here on Joy Road, the Obama gas station, and they use every type of trick to reel us in. And unfortunately, some people think that they're supporting Obama by going to this gas station because it's called the Obama gas station, and they have a picture of Obama. And if you see an Obama special at a chicken shop, a chicken shack, or a chicken place, then you want to get the Obama special, and that's just a trick. So why can't I be successful? They got party stores, they got liquor stores, you got gas stations, you got Coney Islands, fast food restaurants, pawn shops, Metro PCS cell phone stores, grocery stores, chicken shacks, pizza stacks, car insurances, check and go, check cash and bill payment centers, then car dealerships, auto mechanic shops, auto detailing shops, medical, marijuana, group homes, nail shops, beauty supply stores, commercial, residential, real estate. They're all primarily owned by other races instead of us. Now, guess which business is black owned? Now, does this sound like your neighborhood? Now, you can have a strip, and the strip can, in Michigan, and in Detroit, you can have, one part you can have a Chinese restaurant, LA Insurance, a Hollywood Beauty Supply, a Family Dollar, a Meat Town, a Check and Go, so you can get your check, 30-minute nail shop, you can get your nails done, you get some New Wave chicken or Happy's Pizza, or get your food, you got a laundromat, check cash and bill payment center, you got a strip club right nearby, you got a church, you got a cell phone, Metro PCS store, you got a pawn shop or diamond jewelry and loan to take your money, and you got a tax place to prepare your taxes, to get your money. You got a Hydro Giant, a grocery store. Does these sounds like strip malls in your community? If it is, it's not a coincidence that they're there. It's there for a reason. Used car lots, beauty supply stores, nail shops, check cashing stores, they're all there to make money off of us while we scream for help. Moving forward, Deuteronomy 28:18, cursed shall be the fruit of thy body and the fruit of thy land, thy increase of thine and the flocks of thy sheep. Now in Africa, you got so much famine and drought. The ground is cracking. The livestock is dying, as you see here in the pictures, and there's no crops growing. As you see in this picture here below, you see, if not hundreds of cows is dead, and the people of Africa, obviously that's not a good thing when all your livestock die, and if you can't grow any crops. Here's some more pictures. And also note, even though Africa has a lot of resources, it's being tapped into and used by a lot of other countries, and then Africa gets a little bit of a piece of the money, well, not enough. Deuteronomy 28:19, cursed shall thou be when thou cometh in, and cursed shall thou be when thou goest out. So we all know the saying, living as a black man in white America, or driving while black, or guilty until proven innocent. This holds true today, that despite all the issues that the black family has at home, with high rates of divorce and fatherless homes, we still face even greater obstacles soon as we step outside the door. Raising up your hand, as we know, as a black man at a routine arrest or stop, can get a black man lit up with bullets compared to any other race. Blacks are the victims of racial discrimination every day and are more likely to be the law enforcement's main target to incarcerate. Once a black man gets caught up in the judicial system with misdemeanors, felonies, and costly tickets and fines and warrants, it is very hard to recover and succeed because of the financial burden to get out of this situation and because of the negative mark it leaves for future employers or educational institutions. This is a setup, and no other race deals with this problem more than black people. As you see in the picture, in the house, in the home, blacks, we deal with domestic violence and all types of instability in relationships. This picture was from the movie Diary of a Tired Black Man, and here we hear a movie Diary of, I think it was an Angry Black Woman. I think it's a Tyler Perry movie. Or here we see Wait to Exhale. I think that's a movie. Angela Bassett is letting fire to the car because her husband was cheating on her, and that's a common thing in our community. And as you can see here in the bottom pictures, it also can play with your mood, your mental, your psyche, your happiness. So discrimination still exists in the workforce for blacks. Blacks can't just go to work and go home without worrying about someone trying to get them in trouble or get them fired. And America essentially wants all blacks working servant-type menial jobs. As you can see in the picture, help wanted. Back in the day, help wanted white only. And this guy here is carrying a sign that says, if Negro men can carry guns for Uncle Sam, then surely they can drive milk wagons for Bowman Dairy. Because back then they didn't want us, in the beginning they want us to have no guns, but then they allow us to have guns, but then we can't drive milk wagons. And here's a guy shows a picture of being fired. And this guy here has a degree in architecture, but he can only get servant, menial, low-wage jobs. driving while black. As you can see, the black man here, he's behind the wheel, and it's a cop behind him, and he's nervous. And you hear half of the picture, you see the European white man with no cop behind him. And driving while black, we all know what that means, DWB, and looking through your rearview mirror, trying to make sure nobody's following you. And here's another picture how it starts early on. They're making fun of it. But it's not a crime. And, you know, to go along with the curses, in 2010, between 2006 and 2010, 2,529 white drivers were stopped. About 9,100 black drivers were stopped. And this picture right here, this clip shows that this guy, he says, they never stop and frisk me, they never stop and frisk old white guys like me. As we know, Trayvon Martin was minding his business, walking, and he got stopped and ended in his death. And the stop and frisk is in New York, incarcerates a lot of black men, puts a lot of black men in the judicial system. And the impact of stop and frisk is enormous. In 2011, there were almost 700,000 total stops. 6% of the stops led to a summons. 6% of the stops also resulted in an arrest. 88% of the stops led to nothing. 56% of the stops involved frisk. 2% of the stops led to discovery of contraband. 76,000 of the time, force was used by officers on blacks. 51% of the stops were blacks versus 33% for Latinos and 9% for whites. Here we see a picture. You see the guy getting handcuffed by the cop. And this is a common theme that we see. Common thing that we see today, only with black people. But was the prison industrial complex prophesied in the Bible? In Isaiah 42:22, it says that, but this is a people, Israelites, that are robbed and spoiled. They are all of them snared in holes, and they are hid in prison houses. For they are prey, and none delivereth, for a spoil, and none saith, restore. Who among you will give ear to this? Who will hearken and hear from the time to come? Who gave Jacob, the children of Israel, for a spoil, and Israel to the robbers? Did not the Lord, he against whom have sinned? For they, the Israelites, would not walk in his ways. They didn't keep his commandments, and they were not obedient unto his law. Now, with the stop and frisk, just a week and a half after a federal judge ruled that the stop and frisk New York program was unconstitutional, the city of Detroit was developing its own version of the policy. And they were doing it similar to New York. And, you know, they insisted the DPD insisted that this was nothing new. And Deputy Assistant Chief Eric Ewing told reporters that the department is already a stop and frisk policing agency because it already uses reasonable suspicion as a criteria for stopping people, black people. That hasn't satisfied critics who believe shaping the DPD to be more like the NYPD could exacerbate racial tensions within an already troubled city. And unfortunately, it's getting that way, and racial tensions are slowly brewing. But do they want racial tensions to justify things like the King Alfred plan? I mean, back then with the Black Panther Party, I mean, black people had, Black Panther Party had enough. They wanted to be treated fairly. And the only way they felt they can get it was to stand up.